Hello, everybody. I'm so sorry for the slight delay there, but we are now ready and waiting to go. So once again, hello, my name is Paul Sims. I'm Chairman at eyeforpharma. I'm speaking to you today from London, and I'm very happy to welcome you to today's webinar. As you can hopefully see on your screen, it's called Transform Customer Engagement Through Intelligent Systems, Content, and Data. And as you can see, it's actually a very popular webinar. We have around about 1,500 people signed up for today's webinar, so it's obviously something that we care a lot about. But just a quick word about our own motivation for today's session. I think it's very clear that the opportunity for a more modern, a more comprehensive, yet at the same time lightweight and more intelligent approach to customer engagement is actually now possible. We've been talking, of course, about customer engagement and about technology for a long time, but actually creating and executing the approach that we're looking for has thrown up a lot of roadblocks, domain-based fragmentation of different capabilities, silos between different departments, a very much a disjointed approach to actually getting to know and be able to personalize our communication with each individual customer across the spectrum. Inefficient content creation, etc. So I think it's time that we move beyond that, and that is indeed what we're hoping to tackle today. How we can integrate content, how we can find better data models, business processes, analytics to get that streamlined approach that we're all looking for. And of course, we then want to move this beyond just the pilots that we've tried doing so many times. How do we innovate at scale? How do we actually manage to do what some of the larger technology companies seem to have managed to do so effectively? So we're looking at, again, at some examples of omni-channel experiences, HCPs, etc., the things that patients are really looking for. So I'm going to introduce our speakers one by one, if that's all right with you. Just a second, get that working. So on our left is a man who you may well know if you've been involved with eyeforpharma recently. His name is Haider Aleg. Great to have him on board. He's a good friend. He's very much a digital native, still in his mid-30s, and since 2017, September 2017, has been actually heading the digital team at Ferring, particularly on the commercial side of the business. And part of his role is to actually build a unified experience for Ferring brand interaction on several channels whilst transforming business with new partners or technologies. Of course, he's not just a techie person, he's very much a business-oriented individual and just happens to know how sales and marketing work in a digital environment. And Haider actually has a good history participating in many ventures, many different industries, even building his own firm. So he's very entrepreneurial and really welcome to have you here, Haider. So thank you. And next door to him is Matt. Matt, really pleased to have you as well. You've been at some of our recent events as well. Matt's actually got over 18 years of industry and consulting experience focused really on strategic marketing and analytics, particularly within life sciences. And he's very passionate about developing these strategies, transforming commercial models to align the needs of customers and pharma companies as a result of health reform. And he's obviously speaking to us from the US at the moment in New York, I believe. So thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Really, really pleased to have you here. And next we have Elena. Elena, I believe, is speaking to us from Belgium today. She is the Managing Director across EMEA for Microsoft in the life sciences area. She is very much a regional business leader and is responsible for the go-to-market strategy as well as strategic partnerships and business development at Microsoft. And she's got a rich health experience. She's been in the sector for more than 15 years, actually starting in health policy at EU level and then more in the digital and business development roles that she has now. So she's been at Microsoft since 2003, She was Director of Corporate Affairs and Corporate Responsibility. She's a board member of the Women in Leadership Network, and she's a founding member of the Center for Evolutionary Management, which is a network organization aimed to support executive development programs through meditation. So I'm not sure that we can get any of that going through the webinar channel today, but Elena, I'll be calling on you if time requires it later on. So thank you for that. And last but certainly not least is Sanjay. Sanjay is EVP at Indegene. He's going to be taking us through quite a few interesting ideas today. and he leads strategic initiatives at Indegene, is responsible for new businesses in technology, customer engagement, and analytics, with more than 20 years of experience in pharma and biotech, 11 of which have been at Indegene, both on the commercial side and in operations. And previously, he was actually CEO of a leading medical education provider for physicians in the US, so has actually experience on both sides of the coin, if you like. He's worked in many therapeutic categories and disease states, and he is also a keen golfer and fencer. So hopefully, again, some opportunity there to enjoy things after this session. So we've got a fantastic panel. I hope you agree. And of course, like with all of our webinars, I do encourage you guys to make this a conversation and not just a one-way street of information. So you've all said hello to me at the beginning to test the audio, and now I'd love you to use that same box to ask questions throughout and ensure that actually your issues, your interests get answered. Okay, so the first thing I'm actually going to do, though, is because you might not be familiar with Microsoft and Indegene's work in this area. And of course, as technology companies, it's always very curious, I'm very curious certainly, to know indeed what these companies are setting out to achieve within our industry. So Sanjay, can I just hand to you for a minute to let you just explain the vision there? And I think we even have a slide.
Thank you, Paul, for that great introduction. It's really good to be here today with my fellow expert speakers. Just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about why all of us here at Indegene and also at Microsoft are so interested and invested in this particular topic. It's because we think that digital transformation of life sciences customer engagement is a very powerful force that is already unfolding and will intensify in the next few years. In fact, personally, I think that the impact of all of these new capabilities, both on the science side and also on the customer experience side, are really going to define and maybe even redefine this industry in the next some years. We see clues for this in almost every other industry, whether it is banking or aviation or other interesting examples that we might even talk about in the next few minutes. So life sciences, we think it's no exception. Now, there are a few reasons why we think this. The most important one is how customer expectations are changing dramatically. It used to be enough to have a simple straight line, we used to call them customer journeys, with a few digital touch points and largely driven by an office visit by a representative or an event or something like this, but not anymore. And we think this is a trend that is only going to become more intense in the future. Now customers expect all types of bots and digital interactions and in no specific simple linear order, but still expect things to be coordinated and things to be seamless. And we've seen this in pretty much all the industries. So we believe that this is something that is happening and will continue to happen in life sciences as well. And we also have to remember that customer over here refers to many different types of customer groups. There are certainly the healthcare practitioners and pharmacy managers and so on. But there are also various business customers like buyers and administrators in large hospital systems and so on. In addition to that, we think that one of the most significant change in the years to come is going to be the nature of interactions between patients and consumers and the makers of various therapeutics. This has already changed quite a bit, with most manufacturers recognizing that to be true partners in healthcare and in improving outcomes, they really have to sort of think differently about patients and consumers and how they interact with them. And we think that the present way of doing things, of having very different type of interactions, during trials, during the therapeutic journey, it's all going to have to be replaced with something far more seamless, far more matrixed, far more interconnected than what has ever been necessary. Now, in addition to that, not only do customers expect this type of a more complex experience, but then they also expect those interactions to be much more intelligent, which means that traditional ways of looking at analytics as a few dashboards or KPIs is just not going to be enough, right? We have a lot of new capabilities with AI and cognitive services and speech and understanding of each individual customer, but these things are going to have to be embedded in these interactions, right? And that's what we see from all the different class leaders. And then finally, we also think that the traditional systems infrastructures that are in place today are in fact going to become, if they aren't already, a big bottleneck. I mean, if you think about a typical organization, there are sales systems and marketing systems, and then there are various other digital applications. Now, while it does work, this type of a patchwork of capabilities ultimately isn't going to allow for a lot of this transformation to happen and to happen at scale, right? And to happen in a way that is fast enough to meet the customer expectation. So these are some of the reasons why we think that this is a really important topic, and we're very interested to talk about that together as a group this morning.
Thank you, Sanjay. Okay, so some ambitious attempt there to ensure that indeed we are all well connected. So let's just move on to the next slide. Customer experience is the new brand. If you look at the sorts of technology companies, Sanjay just mentioned that indeed we are influenced by these guys more and more. We can see that these are not companies that necessarily have large marketing budgets. Indeed, companies like Tesla have no marketing budgets at all. Yet we do indeed understand what an experience, and we obviously understand their reputation and being influenced by them. So I'm just holding on one second. I think that my slides were not advancing, so I apologize for that if they were stuck on the original. But hopefully you can see now customer experience is the new brand, and indeed those companies at the top are the ones I was just talking about. So the aim, of course, is to ensure that beyond just our marketing experience, that we're actually providing a genuine interaction here. And of course that means that we must think about the future as well. What is it about these companies that's actually ensuring that we do indeed have an omni-channel experience and it is indeed intelligent? Well, let's just have a look at this. I mean, the left-hand side of this slide, you can see that our customer landscape has become a lot more complex in the last few years. This is from a 2017 report, and you can see already the fragmentation of the various different types of organizations we have meeting with our customers, different types of reps, effectively. So it's become a very different situation from how it was a decade ago. And on the same time, if you look at the right-hand side of this screen, you can see that now a quarter of the interactions that were being provided by the sales force have actually been replaced already with digital interactions for the communications that are happening. And of course, much of that is driven not just by ourselves, but by our customers as well. I'd like to invite our panel to come in and have a bit of a conversation about this very next point, which is how our industry is doing compared to others. So, sorry, before I go to that next slide, I'd like to just invite any insights from Matt, from Haida, from Elena, on what you think is actually creating such a big change amongst the expectations of our customers nowadays.
Haida here. So if I may interject in here, thank you, Paul. I think, first of all, when we look at the healthcare professional or patients, we forget that they are educated by other industries as well. So their expectation is also raised because of the other industries that are doing a good job of transforming their business. Second of all, we also have, like Sanjay said, the opportunity to really shift the definition of healthcare. We talk a lot about is healthcare prevention versus curating, and supporting. So I think this definition of healthcare, by transforming our business, is giving us this opportunity to really shape a different industry for the years to come. And last but not the least, the last point I wanted to make is we still see healthcare a little bit behind, and I like to take this example like what happened in fintech. And it is so easy now to send you money. I can send you money, Paul, like right away with my phone, where I'm not able to exchange my healthcare data to any doctor in the world to have a second opinion, not yet at least. So yeah, that's kind of for me the three points that are shaping my views on this question.
Matt here. Happy to follow on from that. Yeah, I certainly agree with what Heider's saying. We've got some room for improvement. There is a degree of complexity that comes with the pharma industry, just in terms of who our customer is. Are we anchoring exclusively around the patient? Is it physicians or organized providers or even the payer dynamics, which I think adds a layer of complexity. But my own perspective is that we perhaps, lent too much on that as a little bit of an excuse to not challenge ourselves to move forwards and try to, if not catch up, certainly try and overtake some of the leading players in this field that sit outside of our industry. So room for improvement from my perspective on how we're doing.
This is Elena. I would say definitely room for improvement, and yet there is a need and also an opportunity to reflect together on the rapid evolution of customer engagement, what that means, because oftentimes it remains ad hoc, sporadic episodes versus ongoing engagement with the user. Is it the customer? Is it the patient? Is it the provider, the prescriber at the center? And so that went actually to the very core of the Microsoft empowerment mission. And that is why 2 years ago, actually, we joined forces with Indigene, announcing a strategic alliance to deliver new life science-focused business application that combine the power of the trusted and intelligent cloud on the one side with Indigene expertise, so that we would no longer have almost like a trade-off between convenience and compliance, because oftentimes engagement means we go for what's convenient, but yet in a highly regulated industry, we don't want to forget compliance.
Thank you, guys. I'm aware that the slides for some reason weren't moving towards the beginning of this webinar, so hopefully at the moment you can see a couple of things that we were intending to show earlier. So this is everybody's smiling faces that I was talking through earlier. This is the slide that was intended to accompany Sanjay when he was speaking through some of the efforts that Microsoft and Indigene are working on together. You can see the 4 components there of the business coming together and fronted by Indigene's omnipresence solution. And then these were the slides I was trying to show you previously. I think you saw these ones already, and then we just finished on this one. So let's move on if that's okay. So we've just talked about our influences from other industries a little bit, and indeed, we think we're doing terribly, don't we, in our industry? But indeed, we're not doing terribly in all areas. This graph shows us that we're roughly halfway up this list, and there's certainly people, indeed healthcare itself is towards the bottom of this list. But it is useful to point out that some of the blue squares, which are the good areas, are actually not in the areas of the customer digitization and personalization that we indeed are looking towards in this session. So certainly in that area there is a long gap and a lot that we need to make up. I can see that a few people are sending in questions, which is great. Keep them coming and we will come and address them very shortly, and I will keep going just for the moment though. Because I want to just illustrate this point, that there has been something of a tipping point in the last few years. If you look at back in 2013, there was only really a desire from 1 in 5 of our customers to be able to interact with them primarily through digital means. That has now changed. We believe that by 2020 it'll be more like 3 in 5, and indeed we hit the tipping point really, the digital native tipping point, if you like, for prescribers back in 2014. So I think it's very easy and comfortable for us to say that this is absolutely the area that we need to work in going forward. So I want to actually move on now, as we are making up on good time here. I want to move to one more slide, and then I'm going to ask you guys in the audience a question. This one is to do with patient engagement maturity. And indeed, you can see here that a good 30% of patients are not currently feeling as if that they are being engaged at present, and really only a small number are showing a higher amount on this graph. And that is indeed a frontier that we absolutely need to improve on going forward. So, Elena, I believe you have something to say about this slide. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, it's prompted by your question on how are we doing compared to other industries. So actually, we felt that it was good to take some lessons learned from what's happening in the retail industry. Some saying it's being transformed, some saying it's being disrupted, but we shouldn't forget that it is evolving as the proximity healthcare that many of the patient, citizens, consumer of healthcare delivery are going to take advantage of. And so we have seen really through a strategic alliance and partnership with Walgreens Boots Alliance, the opportunity to deliver innovative platforms that enable the next generation health networks, integrated both digital and physical experiences, because it's no longer digital or physical as an experience, right? It's an osmosis between the two, and the care management and the solutions that come from that should really make us think about what engagement means, what is that really constitutes a consumer-centric healthcare delivery, and where text platform allow is it to improve medication adherence or reduce emergency room visits or hospital admissions, but through a seamless interaction with the ultimate person that we want to empower. Again, patient, prescriber, or other. And so there is a lot that we have learned and a lot that we are experimenting very humbly, but at the very end with the idea of creating better insights and better experiences through our cloud solutions.
Thank you, Elena. I want to hand over to Haider at this point, because Haider, I believe that you have a couple of slides here which you can talk us through.
Yeah, so interestingly, I just wanted to introduce this slide with another example. In your slides before, we were talking about, customer experience and what does it mean, and we saw some, tech names and big names there. And the way we are looking at customer experience is actually, instead of creating huge library of slides, content, and huge list of channels, is basically trying to become more relevant, understanding more context on the people we want to serve, and creating actually this meaningful experience and valued experience out of this. And when I joined Ferring, one of the interesting discussion I had with our Japanese colleague, they were presenting us a very interesting case where they were having their sales rep were having discussion with the doctor, where they would ask consent, of course, for recording the session, but they were not just recording the session like we are doing here, for WebEx. They were educating and trying to make sure that the next slide is the most relevant one according to the conversation they were having on that call. And for me, this is particularly well aligned with what I was introducing, because by using the right context and understanding, and using the power of technology sometimes to simplify and really chew up all this amount of data, to transform it into a meaningful experience that I have more value for here, bring the right information at the right time to the right target. I think that is a direction we should pursue as an industry to start doing those baby steps. And if you go on the next slide, I mean, what's what's really interesting by looking at this as just an example, personally, I can really foresee more and more those, AI, apps to apps or AI to AI types of interaction, because we look at, how patients and consumers are using more and more assistants. We see beautiful, keynotes on how those are actually great. And we look at the doctors also, having like more and more assistants to chew up also a lot of publication, a lot of data, because they just don't have an army of assistants to do it. And in the meantime, we have as an industry this ability to come and also be better at using the data we have. So I can foresee a world where basically we have more and more interaction that have at the first level that are maybe transactions to then go up into a customer experience, or at least a meaningful, valuable experience for the end user.
Thank you, Heide. I appreciate that. That's definitely thrown up a couple of interesting questions. Before we go to the audience, like I promised, I'm just going to also ask if there's something that Matt might be able to explain about some of the work that he's been doing, explained very simply on this slide, but perhaps, Matt, you could elaborate a little.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. From my perspective, if we, think about what truly best-in-class customer experience looks like, it's really about engaging with customers at the right time, in the right channel, with the right content, on the right format, right frequency, right medium, about the right information that they're seeking for. From my experience, both within my current role and more broadly from my consulting days, a couple of examples sort of stand out. I do caveat those that they are still more at a brand or product level than truly enterprise-wide examples, which I think is the real goal that we're looking for with customer engagement, to do this right every time, all the time with our customers. But from the Pfizer side, one of the things that we've seen that I think really stands out is our efforts around HemaCraft, which is really a means of trying to drive some education and behavior change with particularly younger patients suffering from hemophilia, in partnership with the Minecraft app that Microsoft will know all too well. But really, investing in sort of the gamification route as a means of exposing patients to their disease and helping them go on a journey in the game, but also hopefully a journey of understanding around their disease, and just integrating in a different way to try to drive behavior. Similarly, on the Pfizer side, on the oncology space, our efforts around living with cancer, which is a program created really across any tumor type, any stage of disease. So trying to really think about the cancer as a therapeutic area rather than as a Pfizer brand, and across all channels, to the extent that there was an award-winning movie involved, but also a really rich and immersive app that brings together patients and caregivers alike to engage with one another, as well as content around the disease. And then there's some really interesting examples outside of Pfizer, be it Merck's efforts around leveraging Alexa and voice recognition in the home to try and drive efforts around diabetes management, and Regeneron's efforts, I think, with Alea and their kind of eye-based illnesses, particularly the use of chatbots and AI to bring automatic 24/7 responses to sort of patient queries, are really, really interesting, and examples of us pushing the boundary to engage with customers on their terms. As I said earlier, my one word of caveat is, unfortunately, I think they're still at a product level rather than at the full enterprise level, but it gives me real hope that we're trending in the right direction.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. So some really innovative examples. If you haven't seen the the Hemocraft example from Microsoft, then you definitely should. It's very exciting indeed, and was a feature of our recent awards. So great work there. I'd like to actually do what I've been promising for a few minutes now and ask the audience a question. You'll remember that earlier I was putting up the names of some innovative technology companies and talking about how they managed to deliver very well on their customer engagement and broad-based customer approach. And I'm just curious as to which of the technology innovations that we've seen in the big wide world out there you believe are actually going to be the most influential on our industry over the next few years. So if you look at your screen right now, you should hopefully see a question appear on the front. Which tech innovations are likely to be most highly adopted in customer/patient engagement by life sciences companies by 2025? So is that going to be user recommendations? We're all familiar with how, for example, Amazon drives recommendations through ratings and reviews from various people. Will it be AI-driven recommendations? We're familiar with IBM Watson's work, but also we see that customer or patient-facing interfaces like Babylon, Ada Health, and various different chatbots are being AI-driven. Do you believe that it's the sensory activation that is now coming through to us from other means other than simply how we might type, for example, through Alexa, of course, the voice interface, many different others there, or Apple Watch and the various other sensors that these kind of devices can pick up? Is it user to provider or provider to user? So Uber and Airbnb, of course, outsource their customer communication in many ways to the person providing the original technology. That's not something that necessarily exists in life sciences or even can exist in most instances. But as we become more fragmented and as we become more oriented towards digital solutions, that may well be a phenomenon that improves. And then finally, automated. So we've got examples like Tesla's self-driving and, of course, autonomous vehicles in general. We've got robotic process automation, of course, driving a lot of interactions under the hood of our companies now. So I'm going to hold that open, as I can see about half of you have voted so far. So 3 more seconds to get the rest of your votes in, if that's all right with you. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. Got nearly all of you voting there, so that's good. So let's have a look at the results. We've got a bit of a normal distribution here. I would say that it's clearly, actually, I'm personally quite surprised to see that the sensory activation has been the winner here. It's only just the winner over the AI recommendations, which I expected to be perhaps the more clear winner. So that's very interesting that we do indeed believe that, and I suspect it's not so much necessarily through voice. It might well be because of the other wearable technologies that are indicated there that might be driving a lot of that going forward. So, you know, we've got a good audience for today's session, so that's actually quite a broad scope of opinions that you're seeing on your page there. As I mentioned, we have 1,500 people signed up for this session. So, so some very interesting results there, and I'm just wondering if any of our panel wishes to immediately comment on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing that strikes me is that these two things are so kind of interconnected, right? The interfaces of engagement, you know, kind of getting more diversified to these different devices and sensors. You know, I've seen literature now talking about not just the Internet of Things, but the Internet of Medical Things, you know, as kind of the next wave in medicine over the next 5-7 years. But then all of that interaction capability ultimately needs to be powered by something, right? It's not going to work if we try to send old-fashioned, you know, presentations and newsletters through those sensory interfaces, right? So that's kind of where the AI comes in. How do we develop the information, create the content, create the information and services at scale without the AI is kind of like not achievable, in my opinion. So I think the two work really well together is what strikes me from this.
I would agree with that point. Yeah, and I would add also one element, which is for almost all of these to be really successful and deliver the value and the relevance that is intrinsic to the customer engagement that we aim to have. It needs to be fit for healthcare. So some of these AI solutions that will have to have embedded, pre-embedded right? A medical lexicon, an understanding, a context awareness and an understanding of what is happening. Because we cannot take, a bot that is working well in finance and drop it in a healthcare context and imagine that you will be delivering the same value. So I see the industry maturing really towards, from moving actually from more generic to industry specific, relevant conversational AI or sensors or other type of solutions. And this is almost like the tipping point that will deliver value and therefore, create the space for more customer engagement.
And just to build off that, which I think is absolutely right. I think there is a risk, and it's somewhat unsurprising that these have popped up, but pharma, in my experience, has often done a reasonably strong job of over-indexing on technology, but not necessarily pulling that through with a customer-centric angle. Certainly the wearables and the devices that feel tangible, I think it's easier for pharma to experiment in those spaces. But to Elena's point, the lexicon for our industry, as well as the objectives around being customer-centric, are going to be what really helps push pharma up that slide we showed earlier, where we were sort of middle of the pack and towards the top of the pack, rather than just doing things because the technology can do it, but really anchoring ourselves in what the customers want, what do our customers expect, and leveraging these capabilities to meet those ends.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch back to Elena at this point, because Elena, that was just a bit of an interval before I got to this slide, so hopefully you can see it, which I believe is yours. So do you want to just quickly explain some of the examples you have here?
Yes, I took the liberty to share three very different examples, right? On the one side, we have the Nestle Shield, so skin health investigation, education, longevity, and development. It's in a way the capabilities of computer vision really to provide a feedback to a consumer on the severity of its acne, and then to also provide recommendation on the best cream to be used. By no way the app is intended to replace a visit to a dermatologist, but it shows the art of what is possible in terms of providing relevant engagement, personalized experience in the pocket of the consumer, right? And where AI empowers consumers basically with a cost-effective, curated experience based on scientific knowledge type of expertise. So that is one example. But then, going from almost a consumer to a very highly regulated, sensitive context, we have been collaborating with the experimental cancer medicine team in the Christie NHS Foundation Trust as a way to really use real-time technology to give patients what is a detailed means of recording and monitoring their experience on a clinical trials, where the data that is gleaned from that enables them to them and the providers to have more efficient decision making. So for doctors and for the scientists, right? And so this, as we enter this space, we start redefining what it means to have the patient at the center as a co-decision maker, to make sure that they are empowered players in the clinical trials. And then the last example, it's really how can we reimagine healthcare pathway altogether. And we go to Finland, where the healthcare village brings care into the living room for Finnish citizens in the Helsinki and Uusimaa area, where hospital goes beyond its brick and mortar limits and really has a full digital engagement that is designed across specific conditions. There are more than 20 conditions, providing both the content, the engagement with the practitioners. This is designed with experts and with patients, and it shifts a full engagement from physical to virtual. Now, we're seeing the emergence of this type of experiences, but it shows that people are hungry. It needs to be relevant for them, but also, and that's where we were very proud across these 3 examples and many more, to see that a trusted cloud is the imperative, because we are really dealing with the most sensitive of all information types, which is basically patient data. And there shouldn't be any trade-off between innovation on the one side and privacy and security on the other side. And this is possible.
Thank you, Elena. That was a really nice little journey there through some interesting examples that I hope can teach us all a few lessons. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to just go through some of our audience comments. Thank you to everybody who sent things in so far. There's only 15 minutes left of this session, so do make sure that you are throwing in your questions. I'm going to read a few of them out now. Many people have asked about regulations. Of course, it's a reason we often cite, and I'm going to actually come to that in just a moment. But I'd be very interested to hear what the panel's thoughts are in terms of our sort of compliance first mentality that we often have within our companies, and how they might be able to not necessarily get around issues, obviously, but actually how we might be able to work better with compliance teams to ensure that the things that we do are still imaginative yet on the right side of the law. So very keen to hear about that. Lots of people are asking about any differences between how we approach HCPs versus patients versus payers. Of course, we've used the word customer here quite generously in this webinar to really cover all of those 3. We're primarily focusing on physicians, but of course, patients and payers are a key part of it as well. And then quite a few questions about AI. And I think some of this maybe came during when Heide was talking about how that AI is actually managed across the different channels and customers, etc. So very keen to hear about that. And then a few questions also about human factor. So, where is the digital line forming? What is how well does it fit in with sort of human-centered design in general? And indeed, what are the blockers that are preventing us from being a bit more comprehensive and personalized when it comes to those things? So that's a few of the questions. Does any of our panel want to react to any of those things said so far?
I can, Paul, interject on the question on AI, or at least from our lenses here. We're a bit careful, when it comes to this AI or machine learning, because it's very dependent on the quality and the maturity of the groups working on that. So as a company, we'll be more keen to work with experts in that field, startups or tech companies that are really good at what they do, than trying to become a super tech expert in AI, and much more partnering by bringing this, scientific expertise and trying to go to the same goal. When it comes to machine learning, we underestimate really hard the amount of work to really get a product going, whatever it is, a chatbot or the example I was showing. That's first of all just trying to create those trees, to make something learn. It's crazy. We really underestimate this. And second, they have fancy tactics. So it means you are creating also disruption internally by creating much more work for marketers. If you want to do personalized experiences, then you need to create different, content. And you said it, we are, under scrutiny with the regulations, and creating a lot of content is a burden for many, many companies. So I would say I still feel we are the really baby step, and we can leapfrog by being smarter, partnering with the right people.
Thanks, Heide. Does anyone else want to come in on those issues? If not, we can move on. I haven't. Go on, Matt.
I was going to talk on the sort of the patient, payer, physician element, but I don't want to cut anyone off from the AI side. I think it's a great question. I think it's something that even within my own company and previous company, talk about being customer centric. I've rarely seen organizations then take it a step further to define, okay, are we going to be predominantly patient centric, physician centric, or payer-centric. I think I'm right in saying that Leo is an organization that sort of said we're patient-centric first, and then we recognize all our other sort of customer types as stakeholders that influence that, which I think is an interesting dynamic. It does play out, I think, a little bit differently across therapeutic areas. I think, as we move more into the specialty pharma and sort of rare disease type spaces, I think it's slightly easier to anchor around a patient and get to really that deeper understanding of what they want and need, and then try and influence the other stakeholders around those. But I also haven't seen enough internally to say, we still unfortunately operate to some extent in silos, and that's, the payer organization can often be somewhat disconnected from the sales and marketing organization that's focusing around those physician efforts. So, I think for me, you need to start with that overarching strategy and take it below being customer centric or even just being patient centric to say, how do we recognize and understand the different groups, and then make sure we're connecting the dots internally so that we can drive a coordinated experience externally. But, as I say, I haven't really seen that fully done within our industry, unfortunately.
Thank you. I mentioned a second ago the issue of barriers, compliance, regulatory things, and I can see again that's what a lot of our audience have asked about. So rather than necessarily going to our experts who are joining us on the panel, I thought I'm going to come straight back to you. If you look at your screen right now, you will see that it indeed has a question on it. What is the greatest barrier towards innovating customer engagement in your organization? So we've talked about all the possibilities, but what's stopping us getting there, in your opinion? Is it entrenched mindsets and culture, the lack of a burning platform? Is it the compliance and regulatory hurdles that many people have been asking about? Is it the lack of budget or a lack of senior level buy-in and the support that is required to actually see these things through beyond pilot stage? Is it competencies? We simply don't know how. And that could be either technical competencies or real life people competencies. And then finally, is it data being siloed, poorly analyzed or poorly communicated, certainly poorly usable, should we say, across the organization? Where's the biggest pain point for you? I can see that, again, we've got around about half of you voted, so I'll hold it open another 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's have a look at the replies. Okay, this one is a much more even spread, roughly 1/5 to 1/4 for everything. So it's interesting that indeed we basically have a lot of problems, is the immediate conclusion I'm drawing from this result. And indeed, there's no one thing that's actually affecting us all, a little bit of everything. So we're definitely looking for some answers. I wonder if this is a smart segue now, Sanjay, into a short video that you might be able to share with us about one way in which it might be possible to do more than we previously thought possible. Would that be all right? Sanjay, are you ready to show that?
Yes, absolutely. Paul,
okay,
so for you.
I'm going to switch my screen to you then in that case, and then hopefully you can take us through a 2-minute little video which indeed shows us what could be possible going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I sort of talk more about this and take a minute to actually show this real example, wanted to make a quick comment on the results of that question and the question right before that about regulations. Regulations are important for sure. In fact, they're very essential part of this industry, but the reality is that they are a part of every industry, right? The regulations are different, they have different impact. Here we're talking about the safety and the access to the medicines and the therapeutics that we create, so it's obviously different. But even in other industries, if you think about aviation, safety is a critical part of the regulations over there as well. So I don't think we are an exception in that sense. And really, the question about mindset, the question about what is possible, the question about embracing the reality that the transformation is happening. It's just a question of how much we can benefit from that. I think is the real key. And this is in fact an example of that. It also goes to explaining how we can use the rich data which is available in our industry. Here we're actually looking at how we use data sets specifically we all have access to in our companies. So what journeys did our various customers go through? Here we're looking at their demographic information, the fact that they may have gone into certain websites or done certain searches. These are all information that we do have right within our organizations. The difficulty is not so much the regulations, it's not so much the even the technical complexity, but it's the mindset of how can we automate the use of this information in our various communications, outreach, campaigns, programs, and the like, on both the professional side, which is prescribers and pharmacies and the like, and also on the consumer side, which is on the patients. And in most examples that we've seen, organizations sort of stop here, right? They're looking at next best action using these data and succeeding in some ways in a few countries, maybe with a few brands. But with technology now, you could go much further than that. We can actually look at relationships that are there between the different customers. So I'm going to skip forward to that part. Here, for example, we're looking at various data, which is again very easily available in our industry: publication data, medical event data, clinical trial data, and we can have these algorithms, which can mine this data to see which customers are connected to which other customers, the strength of those connections. Are they recent connections or are they older connections, which are these yellow nodes that we see somewhere in this individual's graph? And again, I mean, the interesting thing is that this is the individual customer, right, that the machine has in fact analyzed. Now, what do we do with that? What's the value of this? Is in fact, trying to make these predictions of, what type of communications, what types of engagements would be relevant for these particular individuals and would be seen as valuable by those individuals, based on all of this data. We don't even have to stop here. Now, using natural language type of capabilities, we can even dive deeper into what are the actual topics and interests that individual customers are expressing. And believe me, they are expressing this in your data, right? It's just that sometimes we think that it's not there, or we don't know how to kind of extract that and automate that. But this is there. This is real data, in this case, for anticoagulation-based portfolio of products, and even just mining present information on trials, on medical inquiries, and things like that. We were able to sort of extract, using these algorithms, what are the topics that the different customers are interested in, and are they deeply interested in them, or maybe are they superficially interested in them? The reason why we were able to do this is not because we had the technology, although of course that is there, that is a part of it. Is not because regulations were a barrier or an enabler. They have to be accepted, they have to be acknowledged, they have to be addressed. But I haven't seen them to be just an absolute brick wall that we can't get through. But the reason that this was done and this was possible, I think in this example, is because the leaders in this organization said, we have to change the way we do things. We have to embrace the future now in order to be leaders in it. And this is, I think, one of the great examples we've seen in how existing data, existing technologies can come together to do personalization, for example, in completely appropriate ways, and ways which are, in fact, where other industries already are in our own, if we have the mindset and if we put in the effort, to work through the regulations and all the other issues.
Thank you, Sanjay. I mean, that was a nice visualization there of some things that we can do, and I assume that people can talk to you if they want to know more about that going forward. Going to bring the slides back to me. So yeah, just hang on one second. Got a few. Sorry, 1 second, everybody. Far too many windows open at the same time on my screen. Just hold on 1 second. There we go. Okay, so we're fast running out of time. We are going to run a couple of minutes over because I do want to just ask our panelists one more question, and I do also want to just ask the audience one more question. So this is a final chance for you guys to interact. If you have a look at your screen now, where are the greatest improvements required to realize customer personalization in life sciences? I'm only going to hold this open for a few seconds as we are running out of time. Do you think that our greatest improvement that we need to see the kind of thing that Sanjay's just shown us, to see some of the other things that we've seen, is it our ambition? Is it our technology that actually is key? Is it the quality of data available? Is it the availability of our data and the availability for us to source through various channels? Or finally, is it in delivery to actually go out there and engage personally with customers and have the resources to do that? So keen to know where you believe the greatest need is, and I can see that most of you have already voted, so thank you for doing that quickly, as I said. Let's have a quick look at the results then. Sorry to cut you off if you were mid-vote there, but we did get most people in. So it's actually in the delivery side that is the clear winner here, with nearly a third, and then nearly a quarter of people saying the availability of data. I actually expected the results there to be slightly different, I'll be honest with you, so that's a very interesting graph that shows us what's possible, perhaps, or what we need to do to make it possible. So recall those results, because I'm just going to go back to my slides if that's okay, so take a mental image of that. And then I just want to really ask our panel one final question to finish us off with. If you could change your strategy to pave a clearer path to having more connected customers, what would you actually choose as the key thing? So maybe we could just go one by one from the order of the on the original slide. So Heide, did you want to kick us off and say, if you could wave your magic wand?
So for me, it's I come back to the very first opener of this webcast. We talked about having definitions of customers, and we forget that sometimes employees, the people we work with every day, needs to be the people engaged in adopting a lot of this fancy and new tactics that will serve our physician, and they will serve the patient. So I believe that we need to be better, and if I could, have this magic wand, I will start changing, from within to have a better adoption of whatever customer experience we want to achieve.
Thank you, Heide. Matt?
For me, I'm not sure I'd change strategy per se. Perhaps more that I would try and gain the company and the industry more broadly to stay the course. So recognize that to achieve some of these goals is going to take more than a typical operating cycle, certainly more than a quarter to see results, and make sure that leadership, doesn't just make the necessary commitments in a single time, frame, but actually sort of commits to a 3-5 year journey, and then gets the company organized behind that mission over a longer time period, so that we start to realize gains and can get out of these kind of pilots and experiments that happen in 3, 6, 12 month time frames.
Okay, great. Thank you. Elena?
Thank you, Paul. So I would bring it back to clarity on data strategy, so that we really know which data, how do we handle our data estate from an organizational perspective, and therefore what value we want to unlock, what relevance we want to provide, what compliance we want to preserve. If that is clear, I would say that from a tech perspective, look at the capabilities, amazing capabilities that Indigen omnipresent solution can deliver. Then the tech is there. But from an organizational perspective, at the beginning, we need to be sure on data strategy, value, relevance, and compliance. And we are delighted, to be part of that journey.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Elena, and for all of your contributions. Much appreciated. Sanjay, final word from you.
Final word. Well, actually, if there's one word literally that I would offer up, it would really be about scale. I think, we've talked a lot about technology and all kinds of other enablement like data. We haven't talked a lot about content, but I think that's also critical. But all of these things can really affect the change. I think if we truly imagine the scale of it, which is really what the difference between a lot of those other successful logos that we had seen earlier and the ones which are not there. How fast we can scale with compliance, with organizational change, and with the human factor. But I think it really is going to come down to scale.
Thank you. Indeed. Well, that's a note of ambition, I guess, for you listening in. And indeed, if you do have ambitions of scale, I would encourage you to get in touch with Sanjay and his team, as they do genuinely have some interesting solutions there, of which we could only give you a glimpse. In fact, generally, I would say that we had to have something of a whistle-stop tour today and only give you a glimpse of many things. I actually had to skip over several slides there in order just to get to the end. Indeed, I hope it's still given you a chink behind the screen of what indeed is possible and what is coming. And I hope that you feel, even if we can see some barriers in the way, that there are indeed some solutions coming, and our customers are very much driving us on our way to making sure that happens. So I want to say a huge thank you to the 5 people that took part today. That's including myself. That's not including myself, by the way, because there's a hidden 5th member who's Colleen Youngblood. I want to say a particular thank you to her for her support behind the scenes. She's been very helpful in getting us today. But of course, to Haida, Matt, Elena, and Sanjay, really appreciate your insights. You've been absolutely wonderful. I'm getting quite a few comments coming through at the moment saying, I've nodded my head so much it's close to falling off. Really enjoying hearing some of the insights that we've got from the thing. Rightly said, Sanjay, regulations are not the hurdle. Lots of sort of very emboldening statements like that. So if you've got anything more like that, then please do send it through. And indeed, if you've got any recommendations for how we should improve these sessions and we'll focus on another topic in the future, then please do send your ideas through right now. And I can see most of our audience is still with us, despite us going over by a couple of minutes. So thank you, really appreciate it. These slides will be available online after the session. Give us a couple of days because we need to sort out a couple of things at our end, but I will make sure that they are sent to you automatically. You don't need to ask for them from me. And of course, I hope to see you at one of our events coming up soon. We've got some interesting things coming up in London, the UK, and in the US, Philadelphia, in October. And then, of course, our flagship events in March and April next year, of which one you can see on the screen in front of you. Really appreciate your time, everybody. Thanks a lot. Have an enjoyable rest of your week. And I hope that you can make some of this customer engagement really happen. Thank you very much, and talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.